The morning sun barely lit the dusty paths of Oba village, but whispers had already spread like wildfire. Ngozi, barely 19, stood outside her father's compound, head bowed, heart shattering. She was pregnant, and the man she loved, Obiora, the charming son of a respected trader, had denied it. He had mocked her tears, claiming he wasn't ready to be tied down by village burdens. Her father, red-eyed with fury, spat venomous words. "You have brought disgrace. You are no longer my daughter." Her mother stood silently, tears streaming, unable to protect her. Ngozi begged, pleaded, but her father's final word was a command. "Leave! Let the man who made you fix your shame." But Obiora had vanished to the city, his promises dissolving like morning dew. Alone with only a small cloth bag of belongings, Ngozi walked away from the only home she'd ever known. The villagers' stares burnt into her skin, their murmurs echoing, "Who will marry her now? Such a waste of beauty." She journeyed to Onitsha, her feet blistered, her spirit barely holding. She arrived in the sprawling chaos of the main market, where vendors shouted prices and okadas weaved dangerously between crowds. She found a corner to rest, her stomach growling louder than the market noise. Life in the city was unforgiving. The child growing inside her made it harder. No one wanted to hire a pregnant girl for housework or sales. "You'll tire too fast," they said, dismissing her with pity or disdain. But Ngozi was determined. She washed clothes for pennies, carried loads she had no strength for, even begged on days her body gave up. Nights were spent under wooden stalls, mosquitoes feasting, stomach empty. Still, her hand always rested on her belly, whispering, "You'll live, I'll find a way." Months later, under a tattered umbrella behind a market stall, she gave birth alone. She named her son Ikenna, meaning God's strength. Holding the tiny boy, she felt a flicker of purpose she hadn't known before. "I may have lost everything, but I'll build a life for you." The days ahead were harder still, but whenever she looked into Ikenna's innocent eyes, she knew giving up was not an option. She saved every coin, started selling used fabrics, then Ankara wrappers, learning to negotiate, hustle, and survive. She became a fixture in the market, the resilient woman with a bright wrapper, her head always wrapped in colorful scarves. Her son tied to her back or sitting nearby, scribbling with a blunt pencil. As Ikenna grew, Ngozi poured her soul into raising him right. She taught him that dignity was not in riches, but in the effort behind every meal. She taught him to respect people, no matter their status, and to never forget where he came from. The other market women marveled. "You've trained him well, Ngozi. He greets elders like a chief's son." Indeed, Ikenna grew with a sharp mind and a soft heart. He read old newspapers Ngozi gathered from the market, asked endless questions, and always helped his mother count her sales. He made her promise that one day he would buy her a shop 3 times bigger, with tiled floors and a fan. Ngozi would laugh, "My son, I don't need a big shop. Just become a man of dignity. That is all." But inside, her heart prayed, "Let this child find the greatness I never had. Let his life prove that my suffering was not in vain." And so mother and son, side by side in the bustling heartbeat of Onitsha, started their quiet climb from dust to destiny. But neither knew that life, with all its tests of love, greed, and loyalty, was just beginning to draw its map for them. Years flowed like the muddy currents of the Niger River, but Mama Ngozi stood firm, rooted in struggle, watered by love. Ikenna blossomed under her care, his curiosity outgrowing their tiny home near Onitsha Main Market. Though their walls were cracked and their nights hot and restless, the little room echoed with laughter, lessons, and endless stories of dignity. Every morning, Mama Ngozi would tighten her headscarf, pack her Ankara fabrics, and head to her stall, while Ikenna, in his faded but neatly pressed school uniform, marched to the community primary school nearby. His notebooks, though second-hand, were filled with neat handwriting and ideas bigger than his age. At night, Ngozi would return exhausted, but never too tired to sit with Ikenna. She would listen to him describe his day, his eyes wide with the wonder of numbers, science, and inventions. "Mama, one day I'll build a machine that makes work easier for traders like you." She would laugh, stroking his head. Then build it, my son, but never let pride build faster than your heart. Poverty mocked them at every turn, but Ikenna's brilliance shone brighter. His teachers noticed. He always came top of his class, often using scraps of paper to solve math problems, inventing ideas for tools he'd only seen in tattered books. One day, a visiting professor from the University of Nigeria, in Nsukka, noticed the boy's ingenuity during a community science exhibition. Impressed by his homemade radio, the professor offered him a scholarship. The news spread across Onitsha. The market boy was heading to the university. The day Ikenna left for school, Mama Ngozi tied her brightest wrapper, yet her eyes swam with tears of pride and fear. She hugged him tightly, pressing a small leather pouch into his hand. "This is my prayer for you, Ikenna. Inside are my hopes. Open it when you're lost or when pride knocks on your door." At Nsukka, Ikenna soared. He studied engineering, blending brilliance with humility. He called his mother every week, promising her that her sacrifices would never be wasted. After graduation, Ikenna moved to Lagos, Nigeria's city of dreams and chaos. He worked with tech firms, but soon started his own company, Tech Solutions, headquartered in Victoria Island. The boy who once counted pennies for fabrics was now designing smart systems for businesses, hospitals, and markets across Nigeria. His name climbed the corridors of power and wealth. Newspapers called him the market boy genius. He bought his mother a house in a serene part of Onitsha and fulfilled his childhood promise. A grand shop with tiled floors, ceiling fans, and glass shelves lined with the finest Ankara. But with wealth came attention, the kind that Mama Ngozi feared. Beautiful women, polished and perfumed, hovered around Ikenna. They praised his intellect, admired his sharp suits, and laughed at his every joke. Yet in his heart, Ikenna felt something hollow. He longed for something deeper than adoration, someone who would see the boy who once sold fabrics, not just the man in the penthouse. One evening, during a quiet call, Mama Ngozi warned him, "My son, not every smile is love. Be careful who you let into your soul. A woman's beauty is seen not by her face, but by how she treats a poor stranger." Ikenna chuckled but understood. His mother's wisdom had never failed him. Then, at a high-profile gala in Lekki Phase 1, he met Vanessa, a stunning, articulate fashion influencer. She was elegance itself, owning a thriving boutique known across Lagos social circles. Their chemistry was instant. She was everything his world celebrated: beauty, success, social prestige. Ikenna introduced her to his circle and soon to his mother. But when Mama Ngozi saw Vanessa, adorned in designer clothes and diamond jewelry, something in her heart paused. Vanessa's smile was perfect, her words polished. Yet her eyes, they didn't greet the soul. Later that night, Mama Ngozi sat on her bed, fingering the coral bracelet Ikenna had bought her. She whispered to herself, "God, open my son's eyes. Wealth blinds faster than darkness." Ikenna was falling, but Mama Ngozi knew she couldn't confront him directly. She needed wisdom, not warnings. She needed to see the truth for herself. And so the mother who once begged for scraps prepared herself for the greatest test of her son's love life. She would go to Lagos, not as the mother of a tech billionaire, but as a lowly maid, disguised and unnoticed. Because only in humility do the masks of pride and deceit fall away. Mama Ngozi arrived in Lagos under the weight of a mission only a mother could bear. She wrapped herself in a plain old wrapper, tied her head with a faded scarf, and tucked her pride beneath layers of humility. In her heart, she carried the prayer pouch Ikenna had never opened, the same pouch she once gave him as a boy. When she knocked on the towering gates of Ikenna's mansion in Victoria Island, the security guards stared blankly. She smiled humbly and introduced herself by a different name, Iyabo, a village woman seeking housemaid work. Ikenna, preoccupied with a business trip abroad, had given his staff orders to welcome a new maid his mother was supposedly sending. The plan was simple. Ngozi would blend into the house staff, silently observing Vanessa, the glamorous woman Ikenna was preparing to marry. The first time Vanessa met Mama Iyabo, she barely raised her eyes. She simply waved her away with a flip of her manicured hand. "Make sure my room stays spotless and don't bother me unless I call you," she snapped. Day after day, Mama Ngozi swept, scrubbed, and cooked, silently noting how Vanessa carried herself. Whenever Ikenna was around, Vanessa's voice dripped with honey. She laughed gracefully, clung to his arm, complimented his ideas, and acted the perfect companion. But the moment Ikenna left, her mask dropped. She treated the staff like dirt, including Maiabo. She hurled insults, complained about trivialities, and once even threw a glass cup at a cook who served her tea too late. Ngozi watched and waited, her heart heavy but patient. She prayed that perhaps there was still a spark of goodness within Vanessa. But her hope faded with each passing day. Then one afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Chinelo, Ikenna's secretary from Ecotech Solutions, delivering a forgotten file. Chinelo was modestly dressed, her eyes bright with intelligence, but her voice low with respect for the home staff. As Chinelo waited in the living room, she heard Vanessa berating the Amaiabo in the kitchen. "Old woman, why are you so slow? Maybe your village doesn't teach you time management." Chinelo's brows furrowed. She walked into the kitchen and spoke up gently. "Ma, I don't think she deserves such words. She's doing her best." Vanessa turned, surprised that anyone dared to interfere. "And who are you? My house, my rules." Chinelo apologized quietly, but her eyes held a quiet fire of dignity. Ngozi watched Chinelo leave and thought deeply. A stranger with no knowledge of her identity had stood up for her. Unlike Vanessa, Chinelo carried grace not in gold, but in her soul. That evening, as Vanessa scrolled through her phone, she spoke to a friend via video call, thinking no one was listening. "I can't wait for Ikenna to propose," she said. "He's rich, handsome, and naive. Once the ring is on my finger, I'll get him to buy me that boutique in Dubai." Mama Ngozi, mopping the floor nearby, paused, her heart twisting. She wasn't just dealing with pride, but with a calculated ambition. That night in her tiny servant's quarters, she wrote in her journal, "A mother's eye never sleeps, but soon my son must awaken." When Ikenna returned from his trip, his mother requested to meet him privately. She stood before him in her maid clothes and whispered, "My son, the test is not yet complete. Let me stay a little longer. Let me see who truly deserves your heart." Ikenna, though uncomfortable, respected his mother's instincts. He agreed, not knowing that the greatest exposure was yet to come. Because Mama Ngozi had begun to suspect that Vanessa's deception ran deeper than her rudeness to the poor. Something darker, something that might not just break Ikenna's heart, but his life. Days turned into weeks, and Mama Ngozi, still disguised as Maiabo, watched silently as Vanessa's true character unfolded. With Ikenna busy expanding Ecotech Solutions, Vanessa grew bolder in her arrogance, especially when the mansion was empty of guests or dignitaries. But on one particular afternoon, Mama Ngozi overheard a conversation that froze her blood. Vanessa, pacing the living room with her phone pressed to her ear, hissed in frustration, "I can't believe this mess. I'm pregnant. Yes, but it's not Ikenna's. He keeps following his mother's useless church advice. No intimacy till marriage. Now look at me." Her friend on the line chuckled wickedly, advising her, "Then make it his. Drug him, seduce him. Let him wake up confused. By the time he knows, it's too late. With marriage locked in, your life is secured." Behind the kitchen door, Mama Ngozi's hand trembled. The girl was not only rude, but carrying another man's child and plotting to trap her son. She quickly fetched an old mobile phone and with shaky fingers recorded the conversation. That night, her heart heavy, she prayed deeply. "God of widows and orphans, vindicate me. Open my son's eyes before it's too late." The following evening, Ikenna returned home. Vanessa welcomed him with exaggerated affection, leading him to the lounge. She prepared a glass of wine, dropping a white powder into it, stirring with a sly smile. As she turned to serve him, Mama Ngozi stepped into the room. "Mama Iyaba, what are you doing here?" Vanessa barked, startled. But Ngozi's voice was firm, no longer meek. "Ikenna, don't drink that." Ikenna froze, staring from the glass to his mother, finally seeing her, not as Iyabo, but the woman who raised him. Vanessa's confusion turned to fury. Who is this crazy old woman interfering in my house? Ngozi removed her scarf slowly, her dignity rising with her voice. I am not Iyabo. I am Mama Ngozi. I disguise myself to know the heart of the woman who plans to be my son's wife. Vanessa paled, her voice trembling. This is ridiculous. She's lying. But Ngozi held up the phone, playing the recording of Vanessa's earlier call. The room filled with Vanessa's own damning words, her pregnancy, her plots, her betrayal. Ikenna's hands shook. He looked at Vanessa as if seeing her for the first time. Is this true, Vanessa? She stammered. Ikenna, I can explain. But the truth was clear, and it tasted like poison. Security was called. Vanessa, still weeping and begging, was escorted out of the mansion. As the gates shut behind her, Ikenna sank onto the couch, his face buried in his hands. Mama Ngozi sat beside him quietly. Then with tenderness, she unwrapped the old prayer pouch she had given him years ago. Inside was a simple note, worn and fragile, that read, When you don't know who to trust, let patience be your eyes and wisdom your shield. Ikenna read it, tears welling up. He looked at his mother with new respect and whispered, Thank you, Mama. Without you, I would have married my downfall. Mama Ngozi nodded gently. My son, the right woman will not come with tricks or beauty alone. She will come with a heart that honors you, even when no one is watching. And in that quiet moment, Ikenna remembered Chinelo, his humble secretary who had once defended an old maid she barely knew. In his heart, a seed of curiosity sprouted. What if love was already close, but I had been too blind to see it? For days after Vanessa's disgrace, Ikenna moved through his mansion like a man haunted. He stood by the large glass window of his Victoria Island home, watching the city lights flicker, wondering how close he had come to marrying disaster. His mother, Mama Ngozi, noticed his silence. Over dinner one evening, she spoke softly. My son, your heart will heal. But don't forget, character is revealed in hardship, not in comfort. Those words echoed in Ikenna's mind as his thoughts returned to Chinelo, the quiet, respectful secretary who had defended Iyabo without knowing who she truly was. She had no wealth, no fame, yet she stood for what was right. Could love be hidden in simplicity? Still, his heart carried fear. He needed certainty. Mama was right about Vanessa, he thought. But what if even Chinelo is no different? What if she's only waiting for her chance? Mama Ngozi saw the doubts clouding his eyes. She placed a gentle hand on his and said, Then test her, not with beauty, but with loss. That night, Ikenna made a decision. The next morning, he gathered his most trusted employees and spread the news. Ecotech Solutions had collapsed due to a major fraud scandal. He told them that his fortune was gone, the company liquidated, the mansion repossessed. Even the staff, including Chinelo, would be laid off. Within days, the news spread like wildfire across Lagos. Associates distanced themselves. Calls stopped coming. His friend Chuka, once his brother, ghosted him entirely. Meanwhile, Ikenna moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment in Yaba, Lagos. The lavish suits were replaced with simple shirts. His phone was quieter than ever. But then, on a humid afternoon, his doorbell rang. It was Chinelo. She stood at the door, carrying a small nylon bag of groceries and a warm smile. Good afternoon, sir. Ikenna, I heard about everything. I just thought you might need someone to talk to, and maybe some food. Ikenna was stunned. You came? Even after losing your job? Chinelo chuckled softly. Job or no job, I still respect you. A fall doesn't erase a person's worth. Besides, you look like you've forgotten how to cook. Her laughter was gentle, free of pity. She stepped in, helped tidy the cramped space, and prepared a simple meal of yam porridge. For the first time in weeks, Ikenna laughed. They talked deep into the night, about life, dreams, fears. Chinelo shared her struggles, raising siblings after her father died, working to put them through school, fighting Lagos's harshness with quiet resilience. As she prepared to leave, Ikenna asked, Chinelo, why are you really here? I have nothing to offer you now. She looked him in the eyes, her voice sincere. Because I see the person, not the pocket. Because kindness is not a transaction. Ikenna. When she left, Ikenna sat in his small living room, his heart heavier. Not with sadness, but with gratitude. Chinelo had no idea that his bankruptcy was a lie, yet she remained. The next day, Ikenna visited Mama Ngozi, telling her everything. She smiled proudly, her eyes glistening. I told you, my son, the ones who stay when there's nothing left are the ones you must never let go. In that moment, Ikenna knew. Chinelo was not just his secretary. She was the woman his mother had prayed for. But before he could claim her love, there was one more thing he had to do: reveal the truth. Because love deserved honesty, and Chinelo deserved to know who he truly was. Not just the man who had nothing, but the man who had everything and was willing to risk it all for love. The next evening, the air in Yaba was heavy with moisture from the impending rain. Ikenna paced the length of his modest apartment, rehearsing the words in his heart. He couldn't keep the truth from Chinelo any longer, not after everything she had shown him. When Chinelo arrived that evening with a small flask of vegetable soup, she found Ikenna restless. She smiled, her eyes tired from the day's hustle, yet her kindness as radiant as ever. Ikenna, you look like you've wrestled a lion, she joked, placing the flask on the tiny table. Ikenna smiled faintly, but then grew serious. Chinelo, there's something I need to tell you. She paused, concerned by the weight in his voice. I lied to you, he said, his eyes meeting hers. The company didn't collapse. I'm not bankrupt. It was all a test, to see who would remain if I had nothing. For a moment, silence hung between them like a heavy curtain. Chinelo's expression shifted, from confusion to disbelief, then to a quiet sting of betrayal. You lied to me? She asked, her voice low, almost trembling. Ikenna stepped closer, desperation in his voice. I had to know, Chinelo. After Vanessa, after everything, how could I trust? But you stayed, even when I had nothing. Chinelo looked away, fighting tears. Ikenna, do you know how that feels? To care for someone genuinely, only to find out they've been watching you like an experiment. He moved closer, gently holding her hands. I know, and I am sorry, but I swear to you this wasn't to mock or hurt you. I needed to see if love could exist beyond wealth, and you proved it. Chinelo sighed deeply, her heart warring between hurt and understanding. Ikenna, I stood by you because I saw a man worth standing by. Not because of your money. But this makes me feel like a subject, not a person. I know, Ikenna whispered, his voice thick with regret. But please, forgive me. Not because I deserve it, but because I can't imagine my life without your sincerity. You are the woman my mother prayed for. Her gaze softened, but she remained silent, the pain still fresh. She picked up her bag slowly. I need time, Ikenna. Trust isn't something you gamble with. She left, closing the door gently behind her. Ikenna sank onto the couch, his chest tight. For the first time, he feared he had lost something, someone far more precious than his empire. Oh, a few days later, Mama Ngozi visited. She found her son sitting in silence, staring at the unopened prayer pouch she had given him as a boy. She left, he said quietly. Mama Ngozi smiled faintly. She didn't leave because she doesn't love you, my son. She left because love needs truth. Now go and give it to her. With his mother's wisdom fueling his resolve, Ikenna drove to Nsukka, where Chinelo had returned to visit her family. He waited outside her family compound under the large mango tree until she stepped out, surprised to see him. Without hesitation, he knelt before her, holding out the worn prayer pouch. My mother gave me this when I was a boy. It held her hopes, her fears, her prayers that I would find someone who loves me for who I am, not what I have. I thought I lost that person when you walked away. Chinelo, I'm not here with gifts or promises. I'm here with truth. I love you. Chinelo looked down at him, her heart caught between the ache of his deception and the sincerity in his eyes. Please, Chinelo, he added, his voice breaking. Don't let me carry this prayer unanswered. Tears welled in her eyes, but then a small smile curved her lips. Stand up, Ikenna. A man shouldn't kneel on wet ground. She helped him up, their hands clasped. I'm still angry, she admitted, but I also know that love like this doesn't come twice. Ikenna laughed, relieved, his eyes glistening. So, does that mean I have another chance? Chinelo chuckled softly. Yes, but this time, no more tests. Just honesty. They embraced under the mango tree, a humble place for a love forged not by wealth or power, but by truth. The skies over Nsukka were a brilliant canvas of gold and crimson as Ikenna and Chinelo stood beneath the old mango tree, their hearts once clouded with doubt, now beating in clarity. The days following their reconciliation bloomed with new warmth. Chinelo returned to Lagos with Ikenna, this time not as an employee or a secret admirer, but as the woman he loved openly, without pretenses. Back in Victoria Island, Mama Ngozi welcomed Chinelo with open arms. The reunion was simple, but laced with joy. She held Chinelo's hands firmly, her eyes moist with pride. You were the answer to my midnight prayers, my daughter, Mama Ngozi said softly. Chinelo, still shy in her presence, smiled. And you, Mama, taught me that love must first pass through fire to be gold. Ikenna, watching both women, his mother who had shaped his values, and the woman who had passed his heart's true test, felt a peace deeper than any fortune could provide. Determined to solidify their bond, Ikenna planned a private proposal. One evening, he led Chinelo to the very shop in Onitsha main market where Mama Ngozi had sold Ankara fabrics for decades. The shop was now larger, renovated, with glass shelves and a fan gently whirring above, a promise Ikenna had fulfilled. In the center of the shop stood a small table adorned with flowers and candles. As Chinelo entered, confused, Ikenna knelt before her, holding out a velvet box. Chinelo, I once tested you wrongly because I was afraid. But now I ask, not from fear, but from certainty. Will you marry me and help me build a life defined not by riches, but by love, respect, and truth? Tears filled Chinelo's eyes as she nodded. Yes, Ikenna. 1,000 times, yes. Cheers erupted from behind the shelves as Mama Ngozi, some market women, and even old friends burst into applause. The market that had seen Ngozi's tears now echoed with her laughter. The wedding was held not in the glitz of Lagos, but in Oba village, the place of Mama Ngozi's beginnings. It was her desire to show her people that a woman once cast out could rise with honor. Oba village buzzed with music, dancing, and celebration. The same elders who had shunned Ngozi years ago now hailed her as the mother of a great man. She raised a son with dignity. She has returned not in shame, but in glory, they declared. At the wedding, Ikenna stood before the guests and said, If I am a man today, it is because of my mother's sacrifices. If I have love today, it is because I finally listened to her wisdom. The couple pledged not just to love each other, but to create impact. Together, they founded the Ngozi Foundation, dedicated to supporting single mothers, orphans, and disadvantaged youth. It was their way of honoring the past while lighting the future. As the ceremony ended, Mama Ngozi sat quietly under a tree, watching the dancing, the joy, the fulfillment. She wore her coral-beaded bracelet, her symbol of strength, and whispered to herself, My suffering was not in vain. My legacy is secure. And there, under the evening stars of Oba village, a mother smiled, knowing that she had not just raised a successful man, but a good man, capable of love, honor, and legacy. Months after the grand wedding in Oba village, the sun rose gently over Onitsha, spilling light over Mama Ngozi's new house, a spacious bungalow gifted by Ikenna and Chinelo. But beyond the comfort, what filled the walls was peace, the kind earned through years of sacrifice, tears, and unyielding faith. Mama Ngozi spent her mornings tending to her small garden, often visited by children from the neighborhood who came to hear her stories of resilience. To them, she was no longer just Mama Ngozi the market woman. She was Mama Wisdom, the living proof that dignity could grow from disgrace. In Lagos, Ikenna and Chinelo thrived, not just as a couple, but as partners in purpose. Together they built the Ngozi Foundation, headquartered in Yaba, Lagos, dedicated to empowering single mothers, funding scholarships for brilliant children in underserved communities, and offering entrepreneurship training for struggling women. Ikenna restructured Ecotech Solutions, appointing Chinelo as the Director of Community Development Projects, a role she embraced with grace. Her first initiative was the Market Women Digital Scheme, which taught technology skills to women traders in markets like Onitsha and Belogan. She wanted to ensure that the next generation of Mama Ngozis could trade smarter, not harder. Oh, and their love blossomed with time. Chinelo was not just Ikenna's wife, she was his best friend, his business confidant, his heart's peace. Every weekend they visited Mama Ngozi, sitting with her under her favorite mango tree, sharing ideas, laughter, and sometimes quiet prayers. One sunny afternoon, as Ikenna and Chinelo strolled through Onitsha main market, Ikenna paused at his mother's old stall. He stood quietly, remembering the nights she counted coins by candlelight, the days her hands were raw from washing, the prayers she whispered when she thought he was asleep. Chinelo noticed his stillness. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her fingers interlocked with his. "I'm thinking about where I would have ended up, if my mother didn't have the courage to suffer for me, if she hadn't disguised herself just to protect me, if you hadn't stood up for her that day." Chinelo smiled, her eyes soft. "Love is always nearby, Ikenna. Sometimes it just wears simple clothes." They smiled, then walked on, hand in hand, partners in love, partners in impact. Far away, Chuka, Ikenna's former friend who had vanished during the fake bankruptcy, now struggled to survive in the same Lagos that had once praised him. When he saw Ikenna's face on a business magazine, he felt the sting of betrayal. Not because Ikenna had left him behind, but because greed had blinded him to loyalty. As for Vanessa, news of her exposure and disgrace had spread. She faded from social circles, her beauty no longer her currency. No one remembered the influencer with diamond rings, only the woman who tried to trade deception for wealth. But for Ikenna and Chinelo, the future was radiant. Their first child, a baby girl, was named Ngozi, after the woman whose wisdom had rewritten their destinies. At her naming ceremony, Mama Ngozi held the baby close, whispering in her ear, "Your name means blessing. But never forget, it is not wealth that blesses a person, it is the heart." Surrounded by love, legacy, and lessons, the family stood united. The world had given them scars, but their hearts carried stars, bright, eternal, guiding. And so the story of Mama Ngozi, the mother whose wisdom changed a generation, continued not just in memory, but in every life her son and daughter-in-law touched. Their legacy? A life where love was tested, but never broken.